everybody, welcome back to the Tai Chi Code. In this lesson, I want to do a brief discussion of the Tai Chi energy of split and how it correlates with the Tai Chi Code core technique of split. In the Tai Chi Code, I have analyzed the Tai Chi Trigram energies and applied them to an anatomical understanding of our waist muscles and our hip actions, and correlated those in a way that I think can give us a more specific understanding of how we create the Tai Chi energies. I want to discuss split because it's important in our daily lives when we're walking. As you'll see in a minute, when we place our heels when we're walking and we shift our weight to the flat foot before swinging through, we are using the Tai Chi energy of split if we understand how that correlates with core movements. I think it's commonly recognized that this sort of movement in parting the wild horse's mane is a split action. You can see the hands split in this fashion. But how does that correlate with what's going on in our core? What exactly is making that motion happen? And with the Tai Chi Code analysis, what we'll understand is the power is coming from flexion of the rear hip. In this case, my right hip is flexing like this to power the movement. And then we're turning the upper waist towards that hip as it flexes. And that creates a rotational energy, which is yin from the hip because it's not projecting energy outward. And it's yin in the upper waist because that causes rotation towards that flexing hip, which is also not an outward projection. But the rotation of the lower waist goes away from that flexing hip, which is yang, creating a more outward movement of that same hand because the lower waist is turning away from the flexing hip. So anytime we turn towards the flexing hip, we're creating yin movement. Anytime we turn away from a flexing hip, and if I do this with my right hand, we're creating a yang movement. Or if we turn the lower abs away from the flexing hip, we're also creating a yang movement. So we're taking a little bit of yin and we're turning it into a little bit of yang by turning the lower abs away. If I were to turn both the upper and lower abs towards the flexing hip, we would get a pure yin movement, which would be rollback. So that is the split core technique correlated with the trigrams. Upper waist is turning to the right, lower waist is turning to the left, right hip is flexing. That is the power. If we were to do the same motion with the waist rotation, but power with extension of the left hip, this is what would happen. That outward projection would be greater because we have a yang movement of the hip muscle extending rather than flexing. Anytime we're extending the hip, we're creating more outward projection of the energy. We see this transition in single whip when we move from this motion to this motion. This shift of the weight here is split followed by pluck. We transition from split to pluck by changing the hip energy from flexion to extension. When we're walking in our daily lives, after we place the heel, we are also powering by flexion of our rear hip, turning the upper waist towards that rear hip and turning the lower abs towards the forward leg, rooting the forward leg and releasing the rear leg from the ground. That is this action here. Many people walk by leaning forward and collapsing onto that forward foot rather than shifting weight in a deliberate fashion. So using the split energy allows us to transfer weight in a very deliberate fashion before we swing through. And I'm not going to go through the core technique of press, but the swing through is the core technique of press. Before we place the foot again and cycle through to the next step. So this action here is the same as this action here before we take a step. In the Tai Chi Yang Style 24 form, where do we see the split action? So I already mentioned at the end of parting the wild horse's mane, but we also see it in the beginning of any time we're stepping up into the cross hands position or the carry the ball position. So from here, we pivot back. This pivot is split. I'm flexing my left hip, turning the upper waist to the left and rooting the right leg. So that is split, powered by flexion of the left hip. Then I shift forward with split, powered by flexion of the right hip. So I just switched to my core waist rotation. And then I turn the upper waist to the left, getting the empty stance. That actually is elbow strike, which I'll explain in a different lesson. Then we step out on the heel, lower the forefoot, and then split again, now powered by flexion of this left hip. When we are closing up the form, let's say after we did step forward and parry punch and apparent close-up, we begin to close up the form. We're going to do split here, followed by elbow strike to get us to the central equilibrium position. When we are stepping up to a kick, let's say following high pat on horse, that is split right there, just stepping out onto the heel, and then we're going to do split in the opposite direction, mirror image here. So that is split, and just like I did in the cross hands at the end of the form, I'm going to turn the upper waist now to the left, and that transforms split into elbow strike. We do the kick, and then this is split as well before I go through this position and this position. In Grasp the Sparrow's Tail, we also have a manifestation of split that generally is not recognized as such, but after we go through ward off and then we roll back, this transition is split and then elbow strike. Recognize this is almost like cross hands. Split, elbow strike before we go into press. That motion here, circling the arms, is the same motion as circling into the carry the ball. Same motion as into the cross hands or the cross hands here. It's all the same two energies synchronized back to back, split followed by elbow strike, if we understand what those movements mean at the core rotation level. I hope that provides a different understanding of what the movement of split is, so it's not simply metaphorical or always associated with the splitting of the arms. There are all sorts of manifestations of split once we understand the core movements, and we can correlate those core movements with the Tai Chi trigram energies. That is the purpose of the Tai Chi Code, to help you understand anatomically what's going on and then apply that understanding to your normal daily movement so you can walk with more confidence, walk with better spinal alignment, and walk with lower impact on your joints. If you got value from this video, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. The channel at this point is only 1 month old, and I would love this channel to begin thriving. So I need your support. Like, subscribe, share, and then drop me a comment and let me know what you think, because I believe this is a very unique explanation of Tai Chi energies that you're not going to find anywhere else. If you disagree or agree with it, let me know.